Scholastic Audio presents Your Blood, My Bones by Kelly Andrew. Read by Jesse Vilinsky, Pete Cross, and Matthew Frow.
No one remembered Pettier Criavel's name. His anonymity was an accident. He'd spent so long saying so little, tucking his secrets into his cheek like sugar candies, that when he finally went looking for them, they were gone. By that time, there'd been no one alive who remembered who he'd been before he came to Willow Heath. It was an unfortunate side effect of immortality. It wasn't that Pettier couldn't die. He was, as a whole, extremely good at dying. It was only that he couldn't seem to stay dead. It didn't matter how he went, if it was quick and painless or slow and excruciating. Each time it happened, he was struck down and buried deep, his body fed to the lifeless grove out back. The following dawn would find him cradled in the shallow roots of a towering pine. Not a little boy anymore, begging and pleading, but pink and keening as a newborn. And no one knew why. Death-defying, said the Westlocks, when he'd first stumbled into their care. A medical marvel, an oddity, a paradigm. Men of science and thaumaturgy alike gathered in droves to poke at him with lancets and knives. They slathered his cells on strips of glass and studied him beneath a microscope. They dissected him like a frog. They killed him in increasingly imaginative ways, until he learned to bear it all without so much as a whimper. He didn't carry much with him, from life to life, but at least he always managed to remember how to die with decorum. It was inborn, he supposed, the way domesticated dogs still buried bones in winter, or the way crows remembered faces across generations. He had, lying dormant within him, a primal instinct that made him extremely adept at suffering in silence. And he'd suffered Wyatt Westlock for 13 long summers. He couldn't remember meeting her, only that she'd always been there this particular lifetime, loud and volatile and prone to fits that left him covering his ears, running for the hills fast enough to set the deer in flight. He couldn't remember meeting James Campbell either, only that he always accompanied his father to Willow Heath in the summer, and he always brought pockets full of candies, toffees and Maltesers, paper bags stuffed with jelly babies, and bars of half-melted chocolates. They'd sit out in the twilit meadow, a jar of fireflies winking gold between them, and eat until their teeth were furred and their stomachs hurt. "Don't save any for Wyatt," James would say. "She's been a brat all day." By then, Pettier had lived so long that he'd already begun to forget the taste of death. Wyatt Westlock's father had come back from the city with a college degree and a pregnant wife and a contemporary outlook on ritual sacrifice. His very first decree as steward of Willow Heath was to call an end to the centuries-long practice. "It's barbaric," Pettier once heard him tell Wyatt's mother. He'd been stuffed in the kitchen cupboards, watching them have their morning coffee. In his fist, the biscuit he'd pilfered from the pantry had begun to crumble. Irremissible. The way things have been done around here. I've spent my entire life watching these foolish old men harvest that boy year after year. And for what? "Necessity makes monsters out of men," came the mother's careful reply. "You know better than anyone what's waiting out there in the forest." "There must be a better way," said the father. "He's just a child. For now." A spoon clinked against the lip of a mug. "But he'll grow, if you let him. I only wonder what a boy like that will grow into, after so many lifetimes of torment." Though the killings had stopped by then, the excruciating pain of the ceremony remained. One midnight a summer, Pettier still drew every eye in Willow Heath. Watched by the Westlock patriarch's hand-picked inner circle, he became Pettier the Deathless, a living icon and a modern miracle. He'd lie bleeding on his altar, his flesh closing up around a knife wound, and watch as grown men fell to their knees. He'd swallow lungfuls of incense, his belly full of fire, and promise himself that one day he'd seize his chance and wriggle free. Because like any captive, he had an escape plan. And Wyatt Westlock was the key. She looked different than he remembered. When she'd left, she'd been willowy and restless, her face kissed in freckles, crawling out of her skin the way Pettier crawled out of his. Now framed by the root-riven concrete, she stood perfectly still. Her hazel eyes were wide and bright, her hair unbound in a loose strawberry spill, and she looked both intensely familiar and entirely new. "Peter? Holy shit!" And then there she was in front of him, her touch like lit cinders on his throat. Clumsy fingers fumbled against his carotid, feeling for the thready pulse flickering beneath his skin. "Peter," she said again, more forcefully this time than before. "Peter, can you hear me?" She ducked into his line of sight, and he was met with her piercing stare. A stare he'd spent 13 turbulent years trying his level best not to commit to memory. Because the thing of it was, Pettier had never wanted Wyatt Westlock for a friend. He wanted her dead.